You know, George has got something that I don't think any other politician in this country's got. Love. You should check it out around Rochdale how it is now. Obviously you've got those who are sceptical, but you've got those who are being won over real quick. I spoke for 30 minutes 2 days ago on the phone to David Tully, who came second in the by-election. Dave's an old friend of mine. I went to school with him. Me and Dave have got so many connections, mutual friends. He knows my parents. My mother trained his wife to be a florist. And it's like, I talked to Dave and I says, have you met George? I said, what do you think of George? He says, oh, I like him. He says, I was a bit unsure about him at first, but yeah, he'll do for me. And it's like, George is one of us. He's one of us. It's like, this guy's not any ordinary politician. You look where he draws his support from. And it's like, people don't support George. People don't admire him so much as they love him. It has to be seen to be believed. I ain't kidding. Never seen anything like it in my life. And it's like, this is George's YouTube channel, bigger than mine with his 396,000 subscribers. And his video is just put out that's out on every platform. It's not just out on YouTube, it's out on Twitter, it's out on everywhere. And this video is going around the world as we speak. And it's like, people love George. It's like, how can someone in politics end up being loved when politicians are thieves, liars? Well, don't be a thief or a liar and people so soon learn to respect you. So I'm proud of him. I'm proud to call him a friend now. Proud. And for him to have come to me, approached me to help him, it's like, I don't follow anybody. No one. Don't have to. Can make my own way. Make up my own mind. But when George comes knocking, you witness that love. Like, who could ever say no? Me and George are like peas in a pod, just like Dave and George are peas in a pod. And it's like, what do we want? It's like, we want some sense. We want this ideologically driven thinking to go away. We want fools out of power to be replaced by ordinary people with common sense. That's what we want. Get the ideologues out. Get the fantasists out. They're going to get us in trouble if they haven't already. They're going to get us into even more trouble than we're in now as a town, as a region. Like, this is George. George has spoken in Parliament this week, I think twice. Every single one of them, every single speech a tour de force. It's like, George can wing it. It's like, I thought I was good at winging a speech. You know, getting into me stride. George, oh wow. It's like, we can all learn from George. And do you know what the fun thing is? I joined George. You can join him too. We can all join George. Who wants to join George? Listen to what George has to say.
On that surreal note, let me quote Rudyard Kipling,
We don't want to fight, but by jingo, if we do, we've got the men, we've got the ships, and we've got the money too. There's plenty of jingo, Madam Deputy Speaker, but of course the men, the ships, and the money are more difficult to find. Some of the fantasy talk in this debate, I genuinely hope, is widely seen by the general public. It was a Gilbert and Sullivan performance as they first conceded that our weaknesses are such we need to conceal them in the report. That's what the Right Honourable Gentleman for Rayleigh said in an intervention. We've had to conceal the extent of our weaknesses in this report. No, I won't. I won't. I'm mindful of the Deputy Speaker's injunction that she's fast running out of time, and I don't intend to take my whole 13 minutes. Don't worry, I'll make sure people see the Right Honourable Gentleman's performance. We need to conceal the extent of our weakness, and then he adumbrated our weakness. And if that wasn't our total weakness, if there are weaknesses that he concealed from that list, then I ask myself, why on earth are these people pirouetting in this Parliament about which enemy they're going to fight, in which theatre of war, when they don't...
Point of order, Mark Francois.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll keep this very brief. For the record, the gentleman opposite has traduced me. He's literally said directly the opposite, as Hansard will show, of what I actually said.
Thank you.
Bet you a pound that George is right. All of you. Every viewer, I bet you a pound that George is right. You know why? Well, I follow these matters of sabre rattling because that's what war is, isn't it? Now, the illusion of the ability to project force, and our country seems to just be happy with that. We don't really have a navy to speak of anymore. We don't really have an army to speak of anymore. We don't have much of an air force. We've got no air defences. Where once upon a time, as an island, we were protected by the sea and how many guys you could fit in a ship. Nowadays, we're not. If a different sort of leader of Russia were in charge, there's a trick going on if you don't follow the news in Ukraine, where most of the Black Sea fleet is damaged, and quite a few of them have been destroyed. Russian fleet at Sevastopol. What's the method that's been used to take those down? Well, they send in British-made anti-ship cruise missiles with a flight of drones. The drones overwhelm the air defence and the missiles hit the ships. Storm Shadow missiles. Our missiles. We've given them to Ukraine and they're using them to destroy the Black Sea fleet. Now, 30 years ago, if we were playing that game with Russia, Russia would retaliate against us directly and then ask the world, well, what are you going to do? Nuke us? What are you going to do? Nuke us? And that gives them pause. And it only take really a handful of well-placed conventional weapons, not nuclear, conventional weapons that could bring this country to its knees. Take out a couple of motorway bridges. Hit Folkestone docks. I'm serious. It's like under previous Russian governments, they'd hit us for what we've done to them, for what we've allowed to happen in the Ukraine. We've got guys on the ground who are operating those weapons. And we mouth off. We got no air defence, and the chosen method of attack against Britain would be, what they call it, a blackjack bomber. Could fire its cruise missiles about 2,000 miles away. It'd be over Scandinavia launching missiles that we couldn't stop and then be on the way home. Well on the way home before they actually hit. And you know what the world's like these days? Satellite imaging, drones, incredible optical devices. They could hit their targets. What would they have to hit? Humber Bridge, Thelwall Viaduct. And this country would be at a standstill. Suddenly, there'd be no food on the shelves. It wouldn't take long at all. Our country is completely reliant on road transportation. So what are the primary targets in Britain? If you're going to go to war with somebody else who didn't want to be, you know, targeting civilians and it'd be a terrible loss of life, maybe they might go with like the Israeli method of, well, we'll cut off the food supply. Let's fuck them up proper. Let's hit Stanlow Oil Refinery. It's like, we're defenceless against modern weapons. The sea is no longer our great shield and the thing that will always save us. It's gone. And here we are, mouthing off. Once upon a time, we had warships piled up at Scapa Flow. We had a big navy. We haven't got one anymore. Our air defences are based upon, well, we have got a couple of destroyers in the North Sea with the ability to shoot down a missile. It's like, okay, what if they decide to fire 60 at us? I mean, this is what we're talking about. Big ships go down at Sevastopol. Big, expensive ships. And it's embarrassing. And it's British weapons that are being used to destroy them. It's like, what does Britain have to do to provoke Russia for Russia to respond? What do we have to do? We've provoked Russia by getting involved in the Ukraine. I've spoken about the Ukraine before. You know how I feel about it. It was suicide to go to war with Russia. It's about a matter of start a war you can't win. Go on, start a war you can't win. Provoke them, provoke them, provoke them. And eventually, when they call you bluff and invade, then suddenly you're a victim of aggression and all this bullshit they're throwing around about, oh, he aims to take over all of Europe, and it's a matter of, you know, you weren't saying that before. You're a bit sheepish about the old Ukraine thing until it got hot. And then it got hot, you decided to pick the wrong side. And there are those of us who follow this kind of stuff, and it's like, how come our governments have suddenly got involved and we've picked the wrong side? It's like, I use the term, don't I? I'm not going to say it because I call it a sea fight. See you next Tuesday fight. It's like, well, you've got two nations that are not to be trusted. They're not really democracies. We haven't got so much in common with them. They've got their own beef with each other. It's like, we should not intervene and get dragged into a foreign conflict. The Ukrainians were emboldened by Boris Johnson saying, oh, we'll give you whatever you need. Was it 400,000 Ukrainian troops dead? And they're saying, oh, that's an overestimate. Okay, let's just say it's 250,000 then. Is it still bad? I made videos back when that war started saying exactly what happened. I'm like, all they've got to do is bring down all the artillery from up the road. And the artillery piece with the drone as the spotter is now the ultimate weapon in a land battle. The ultimate weapon. They can put a howitzer on the back of a truck or self-propelled artillery like a tank with a big gun. And it can be well away from the target area by the time the shell's landed. It's like, that's how it works now. They can be accurate miles and miles away where that was never ever possible in the past. But that's modern warfare. It's like, unless you're able to outgun the Russian army, which is an artillery army. Unless you're able to outgun them, you'll never defeat them. And their ability to produce their weapons, it's not so diminished, because we're only talking about shells and guns. We're not talking about highly sophisticated equipment. We're talking about equipment that the industrialized nations in the world have been able to produce quite handily for 100 years. Making guns. It's not such a big ask. We've got ourselves involved in a terrible, terrible conflict, and we've prolonged the conflict, and the actions of our government have seen hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians killed. And what have we done? Oh, we've just provided them with weapons, and we've pretended that they're the good guys. And it's like, it's asinine. It's outrageously stupid what's been done. But hey, we had an outrageously stupid Prime Minister, didn't we? A man of law character as our Prime Minister. There's a perfectly good deal on the table with the Russians, and all that had to happen was the end of Zelensky's government and probably elections. That's what needed to happen. But no. Our government intervened in the Ukraine and scuppered any chance of peace. And it's like, we must be in the firing line of the Russians. In some regards, our politicians deserve it. We don't. Our politicians do. They deserve it. Our media deserves it. But they're not going to suffer if we get dragged into a war. Properly dragged into a war. Not a phony war like we're seeing at the moment, where we're pretending, oh, we're just giving aid to one side. It'll be us who suffer. The people who suffer. And then the arseholes in the media who've gone with the spin, who've gone with the bullshit, and our idiot politicians. Nothing will happen to them. Nothing at all. They'll just come up with a load more rhetoric as to say, see, Putin's evil, the Russians are terrible evil, we've got to double down. The war drums will start to beat, and it'll be, with our infrastructure smashed, our ability to wage war is severely diminished, and if we retaliate, they'll retaliate too. And Joe Biden's in the White House, and do you think he's going to risk World War III to protect us from the Russians? I don't think so. One thing you can rely on Biden for is to do nothing. He's made a career out of being paid to do nothing. Not take a bribe to do something. No, to be paid off not to do anything at all. And he appears to be pretty good at that. He's proved it. He's got a track record now. Debacle in Afghanistan. Ukraine war. Done nothing. Acted when it was too late. Sent Kamala Harris to negotiate with the Russians. Let's listen to George. He's better than me.
The Honourable Right Honourable Gentleman for that point of order. I think he's used it to make his point, but I will return to George Galloway.
Pomposity, but not a point of order. The Right Honourable Gentleman said we were careful to conceal some of our weaknesses, and then he adumbrated those weaknesses, and if there are more that he concealed, we're in very big trouble. But my point is this: we haven't the men, we haven't the ships, we haven't the money. So why are we picking enemies? I've lost count of the number in the course of this debate that we are either already fighting or may have to get ready to fight. That's the absurdity, the Alice in Wonderland nature of this debate. We can't retain even the low numbers of people that we recruit. Why? We ought to know why. The lions don't much like the look of the donkeys that lead them into war after war, which they later disown and admit should never have been fought. You know, Madam Deputy Speaker, to what I refer. I had a debate in the Oxford Union. The then Defence Secretary ran away, didn't turn up. I had to deal with his subordinates. But I made the point there. I was a boy soldier, Royal Artillery Battery 2, Army Cadet Force. I trained with the Royal Marines for weeks in Poole in Dorset. I am in no sense a pacifist. I want to defend our country. I want our soldiers to be properly paid, properly housed, properly clad, properly trained, properly armed.
See, that's the point. It's all right to wave the fist and warmonger even, if you've actually got a capacity for war. You can negotiate from a position of strength and keep the peace. That's supposedly why we democracies maintain these strong militaries. So we can say, well, if you're going to mess with us, we'll mess with you. You can negotiate from strength, but Britain, we snipe from behind France like we did to get involved in World War II. We weren't in any way prepared to fight World War II. But we were like, oh well, if we draw the line at Poland, it's never coming here, is it? We can mouth off and say anything we like, and then the next thing you know, France has fallen because they've got really no will to fight, and they've been obviously as well outmaneuvered, outthought. Didn't take the Germans seriously enough, paid the price because it was all over in days. Blitzkrieg really means take the roads and hit the big roads and get your military down that bloody road as fast as you possibly can and surround them and start shelling them. Blitzkrieg. It's like, we don't advance 10 miles a day, we advance 50 miles a day, we advance 100 miles a day because we take the enemy's roads. That's what Blitzkrieg is. So it's like France falls quickly, and then suddenly the Luftwaffe have got air bases in northern France, and then all of a sudden most of Britain's in range of their bombers. Oh well, we're not prepared for this. Only the foresight to build radar. Something the Germans didn't have at the time. It was a British ingenuity, a British invention. If we didn't have radar, we wouldn't have had a chance. That's the only bit of foresight that was shown by Britain in getting involved in World War II. We lost World War II. We came last, but no one seems to understand it. Look at the way the world's shaped. I've heard a lot of people that recently been talking about the Balfour Declaration, saying this is where it all started with Israel. Well, yeah, it was a different world then, wasn't it? We had 50,000 troops at Port Said when we were mouthing off like that. The Ottoman Empire was falling into ashes and abandoning the territory, and we did deals that created all these countries in the the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia. We created all those countries. The deals that we did. You ever seen Lawrence of Arabia? If you're going to watch Lawrence of Arabia, you should probably also watch Khartoum and ask yourself how ungrateful the Egyptians are for the assistance of the British Empire in putting down the Mahdi army. We were a power once in that part of the world, in fact the only power. And then Suez Crisis 1953, what happened next? Oh, a coup in Iran. This is Americans who did this. Russians who did this. Don't hear anyone talking about Hey, you know, once upon a time, it's like, you know, the British were quite strong in that part of the world. They could actually guarantee the safety of Israel, and for that Israel would never have to build its own military because, hey, we gave them permission to be there, and that the world spins, and like 40, 50 years later, power dynamics of the world have completely changed. It's like you go and knock on the door of the CIA and ask them what they think is the root cause of all the trouble in the Middle East. They should know. It was them who stabbed Britain in the back over the Suez Crisis. It was them who brought about the coup, the fall of the Shah, and the reinstallation of the Shah of Iran, and the ousting of Mossadegh, when the Iranian government set about nationalising BP in the same way as the Egyptians had nationalised the Suez Canal. Created an eternal enemy that came back to bite Iran on the arse, 25 years later? 79, revolution. Tyrants in power in Iran. Iran's a lot like Rochdale, politically. Seriously. It's like people are having a go at George, saying, oh, well, he ran completely on the Gaza situation. He says, yeah, but it's like every other election I can remember in Rochdale's been fought on the Gaza and the Kashmir question as well. Labour Party make meaningless assurances to the local Muslim population that tend to take democracy a little bit more seriously than the rest of us, and tend to vote and promise them that the Labour Party promise them that have solidarity with the people of Palestine and Kashmir. The Labour Party make it central to their campaign in local elections and general elections that they reach out to the Muslim population of Rochdale and promise solidarity with their ideological brothers, their fellow Muslims around the world. That's their tactic to win. So when they betray, when the Labour Party is seen to have betrayed those election promises, there's a backlash. George knows this. So George comes in and says, look at these hypocrites. Look at these hypocrites who promised you every election, every pamphlet you ever get through your door from the Labour Party in Rochdale will say, and solidarity with the people of Palestine written all over it. It's like, has Rochdale got a navy or an air force? It's got a military advisor. I'm running against him in the local election. I'm running against Rochdale's military advisor, a man who voted twice in the last local elections and got a police caution for it because they didn't want to take it any further, because he managed to explain to them that he didn't actually understand the rules of democracy, that it's one man, one vote. And they let him off with a caution. I'm running against this guy. His motto is strike first, strike hard, like Cobra Kai. But when I see him walking the streets around here, he's a man about 5'6" who doesn't raise his head from the pavement in order to look you in the eye. That's who they are. It's like the betrayal that's led George into power is a betrayal by the Labour Party in going back on their election promises to the people of Rochdale. It's like, I spoke about Rochdale many times, and it's a matter of, once that Muslim vote starts to use its own mind, starts to vote for its own interests, the Labour Party have finished. And we are lucky to have George Galloway come in. We were lucky to have George Galloway. If not, somebody a lot worse would have got in. Instead, we get the great man. It's like, I find it weird, you know. It's like the people in this town who like to mouth off a lot about anti-Semitism and the like, right? They don't tend to know very much about how much trouble the world's in. They don't know anything, but they've got a lot to say. It's like 6 years ago, Trump in power, I was thinking, you know, a deal could be done. Israel, Palestine, a deal could be done. I think Trump's got the right idea here. It's a matter of, you've got a lot of supporters in the world, Gaza, that have got a lot of money to spend, who would be willing to invest in Gaza, with it being some of the nicest real estate in the world. They'd be willing to invest and create jobs and create wealth, and it's like, your little city-state could be one of the richest places in the world, with all the money it could bring in. That was actually, there was a chance of that once. It was there. It was what was trying to be done with the old Abraham Accords, Trump. It's what he was trying to do. That's the outcome that the Israelis themselves were looking to. We can do these a deal that'll make the Palestinians rich. Now look at where we find ourselves. Biden gets into power in what was flat out rigged election. All those postal ballots and the old COVID thing, the old COVID lockdown, meaning, well, they just sent everyone a postal ballot, practically. Rigged election, and an incompetent comes into power. An incompetent. And everyone in the world, every little tin pot tyrant, every little wannabe dictator, every wannabe aggressor's like, hey, the Americans are off the table. They ain't gonna do shit till it's too late. Let's move. The Taliban showed the world the way. And have you seen the shit we're in now? Sorry, I'm sorry, boss. I'm cramping your style.
I've picked up Tommy Atkins, you know, stricken with addiction from Piccadilly Gardens in Manchester, just out of strange ways, addicted to spice, abandoned by the politicians that gaily sent them off to one needless, pointless, fruitless war after another. Don't come here and say you're standing up for Tommy Atkins. It's the donkeys that sent them to wars that even those donkeys now disavow that are the reason people don't join our armed forces. They don't trust these people over here not to send them into another Iraq, not to send them into another Afghanistan, and they are right not to trust them. The truth is that our country is in very real danger of falling into the trap of Mussolini, going around the world threatening people with Germany's army. Our politicians go around the world threatening people with America's army. But there's a big change coming, Madam Deputy Speaker. They don't like it on either side of the aisle. But President Trump is coming back in November. And he doesn't much fancy their NATO. He doesn't intend to send American soldiers to die for Kupiansk or for the Zelensky regime in Kiev. He has no intention whatever of continuing their war in Ukraine. And I heard a senior member of the House say, if America withdraws from NATO, we are going to have to increase our contribution to 5%, 6, maybe 7% of GDP. These people seriously imagine that they'll continue NATO without the United States of America? What kind of NATO would that? Would really be Gilbert and Sullivan. Unless, of course, we're going to devote not 50 billion of our public treasure, but hundreds of billions of our public treasure on defence. Well, have any of these people seen the state of the public realm in Britain? Have they seen the state of the National Health Service? Have they seen the state of our streets, our public buildings, our public transport? Have they seen the wage packets being earned in this country? Have they seen pensioner poverty? Have they seen fuel poverty in action? Have they met people that have to choose between eating and heating? And these fools want to spend not 50 billion, but hundreds of billions on weapons of war that we're going to fight with an army that could fit into Villa Park. 70,000 soldiers can fit into a single football stadium. Madam Deputy Speaker, I was for some time the Member of Parliament for a naval shipbuilding yard, Yarrows, on the Clyde, producers of excellence. I wrestled, not physically, but I wrestled with our late and lamented friend, Alan Clark, when he was the Minister for Procurement. And I won. I got all 5 of the Type 23s that were procured at that time. I want us to have a good Navy. I want us to have a good army. But not so we can sail it to bombard the natives in the Red Sea. Not so we can send a Gilbert and Sullivan squadron to the South China Sea like a pea shooter firing at an elephant, or a whale, in fact, in the case of the Chinese Navy. Not so we can pretend that our 70,000 soldiers and our aircraft carriers that break down and have to be glued together, our destroyers that crash into each other in the Solent. Not because I want to pretend we are a Rudyard Kipling era imperial power. That is the key problem, Madam Deputy Speaker. Some of these people still think we are in the 19th century, that we can send gunboats up the Yangtze and not have them sunk, that the natives in the Yemen are the natives we used to push around for a century or more. The Empire strikes back, you know. The Empire's actually bigger than us now. We owned India, now the Indians own us. Shall I take that metaphor further? The idea that this little country of ours, this dear green place of ours, with all of its problems and its enfeeblement caused by our economic decline and the rapid and massive economic advance of others, is still in a position to stand in this Parliament, making dispensations to this battleground or that we can still slice our diminishing national wealth in a way that allows us to pretend to be an imperial power. I have time only for one last point. I was startled by the Right Honourable Lady, the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, when she told us that 2 billion of our defence budget is going on foreign exchange costs, meaning that not only are we spending 50 billion of British taxpayers' pounds, we're spending it in foreign countries. We're allowing foreign companies and yards to build our defence infrastructure in a way, as the honourable gentleman, the right honourable gentleman from North Durham pointed out, in a way that France would never dream of doing. So whatever we're going to spend it in Britain, spend it in British yards, in British factories. You'll save $2 billion in foreign exchange costs at the very least.
So what's George wrong about? Does his homework, doesn't he? Knows. Our current crop of politicians are going to get us smashed. They're going to get us smashed. Things are going to get worse for us, the ordinary people. They're going to get us in more trouble than we can deal with. And say, it won't be them who suffer. Won't be the warmongers at the Guardian. It's a weird thing to say that, with the positions they usually take on, or used to take, as to where they'd once upon a time been arm in arm on foreign policy with Mr. Galloway, but he stayed the same and they've become warmongers. You think they're going to suffer? Will it be them who get sent to fight? No. Will it be their kids who get sent to fight? No. It'd be us, won't it? Be bloody Dave Tully's kids. I ain't got any kids. Be Dave's kids. Be George's kids even. The grandkids. That's who'll get expected to fight. And it'll be a matter of, oh, come and join the army. It's nice and woke here. We've got safe spaces. It's like, what quality of individual are you trying to recruit? People are easy to indoctrinate. It's like at the end of the day, they will not win you a war when it actually comes to the fighting. It's like you might have, say, an armed forces of 70,000, but what if 25,000 of them are shitlegs who are just there because they wanted a job? It's like, I'm a child of the Cold War, so they used to let us fight when we were kids. They used to let us fight. And much of the indoctrination that we did at school, you know, at sports, PE, even the way we were educated was all about us following orders, communicating information clearly, passing orders down a chain of command from headmaster to teacher to pupil. It's like, that don't exist anymore. That discipline's gone. It's like, we as a country used to produce excellent soldiers, and it was because of that rigid system of education we had that was designed to create them to fight the Russians in a Third World War. Now it's gone. Now we'll be sending a load of pansies. Says we are. I'd be amazed if you know, one of these comes forward to say that our military was actually combat effective when it's not launching a missile 200, 300 miles. They can manage that. You ask them to fight, you can forget it. Would you rather have 1,000 hard bastards from the north of England, or 50,000 pansies straight out of school who've found a way to get paid and have a job straight out of school? That's, in essence, like almost going to a holiday camp, because that's what our military is now. It's like they haven't got it in them to fight. You've got to start early to create soldiers. We don't do it. We've been not only deindustrialized, we've been softened up to in essence, fatten us up for the kill. We haven't got the people available to fight. I know, guys, I can go through my phone. Like, okay, who's got military experience here? I can find you a couple of former Royal Marines. They're 50 now. But it's like, what kind of men do you think they are? They're the likes of which will never be seen again in this country. got safe spaces. It's like, be real. Our government are going to get us whacked. We're going to end up in a war. We'll end up declaring war on some country, thinking, oh, well, we're hiding behind this country and this country and this country, as if it is the 19th century and that our navy can save us. We're asking to be humiliated. We're asking to be humiliated, and our reputation diminished further. Britain's military is a paper tiger, untested, untried, 40 years. Really? Yeah, we played second fiddle in Iraq and Afghanistan, but that drained our military, and we never rebuilt it. And the kind of action that our guys saw was to have psychological warfare used against them endlessly, like they did in Northern Ireland. Everything's a wind-up, everything's a come-on. And how does that end up? Usually massacres of innocents, and then the enemy are like, oh yeah, that works for us. How damaging is that for their morale when they're all being court-martialed? You get it these days where soldiers, our soldiers that have taken part in foreign wars, they're like being sued, being arrested, going to jail for their actions. And it's like, well, what did he do? He killed some innocents. Why might he have killed some innocents? Because we were occupying a foreign country and they set about doing their best to frighten our guys and to wind them up, like we do if we were being occupied. It's like sending armies to nation build in countries where they don't speak the language is asinine, and we just haven't learned. We are not a big enough power to be mouthing off, and we're certainly not strong enough defensively to be giving advanced weapons to the Ukrainians. Because when them Russian missiles target us, we're not going to be able to stop them. The air defence systems in Ukraine might work to a degree, but we haven't got any at all. It's like George is right. His analysis of the situation is very similar to mine, right? And do you know why it is? Because we're both right. You could even drag up chaps who would side themselves on the right. Guy I admire, whose books I read, Peter Hitchens. He'd agree with George on this. He'd be absolutely shoulder to shoulder with him. Even though 2 weeks ago he was saying George had fought a disgraceful election campaign, not understanding what Rochdale politics is. I have left a tweet for Mr. Hitchens that I don't know if he's seen. Pointing to him as to say, you know that every election in Rochdale's fought on the Palestinian question. I'm just saying. It's like, I stand with George. I'm going meeting him on Sunday again. He's my friend now. He offered me the hand of friendship. I want you to work with me. It's like, the invitation's open to everyone. Everyone. It's like, stand with George Galloway. He's one of the only good ones we've got left. Or you can put your trust in a bunch of fantasists who'll get a load of us killed and spend billions continuing to ruin our country with cycle lanes and low emission zones and fucking windmills